At this hour, the German government's response to the coronavirus pandemic is under the spotlight. Now, we're going to take you live to the German parliament, where Chancellor Angela Merkel is set to address lawmakers and answer their questions about her government's response. Let's talk about that first with our political correspondent, Kate Brady, who is following the latest for us. Kate, hi, good to see you. What do we expect to see from the Chancellor, to hear from the Chancellor and from lawmakers today?
Well, of course, at the centre of this hour of questions, we're expecting to see the coronavirus pandemic and the German government's reactions to that in the previous 8 weeks or so here in Germany. Of course, there's all sorts of different aspects that we expect Chancellor Angela Merkel to be questioned on. Of course, those rather controversial shutdown measures as well, and the timing of which restrictions were imposed, and also the timing at which restrictions were eased here in Germany. On top of that, I don't doubt that there'll also be questions about the responsibility of Germany's 16 states and what role they play in the easing of restrictions, and of course, looking ahead to the coming months, if not years as well, how the German government intends to actually cushion the economic impact of the coronavirus pandemic. So it's certainly going to be an interesting hour, but it will very much be focused on the coronavirus pandemic. And this is, of course, is something that we've seen Angela Merkel do several times now since she came into office for her final term in March 2018.
Okay, Kate, I'm just going to cut you off there because the Chancellor is just starting to speak. Let's go live to
question time for the government that was planned for the end of March can be held now. Some 3 weeks ago, on the 23rd of April, I gave you the opportunity to talk to you about our plan in the pandemic. We are still living with the virus and will continue to do so for some time because the facts haven't changed. Even if individual research approaches give us hope, there is still no medication and there's still no vaccine against the coronavirus. It remains, therefore, a danger for every one of us. A corona infection can often be very mild, but it can lead to severe damage and even to death. I'm thinking here of all of the people whom we have lost to this virus, and I'm thinking of their families at this moment. So these remain the facts. But of course, we have not stopped searching for a way to combat this. In the last few weeks, we've done a great deal, and we have achieved a great deal. We are encouraged. Right from the word go, we knew that we wouldn't be able to stop the spread of the virus, but we did want to slow the spread of the virus, and indeed knew we had to do that. And that has been the aim that we have all pursued. Now, we can say in recent weeks and months, we have all made huge efforts to achieve this target, and we have come much closer to achieving it. We have been successful because our citizens, the state, industry have joined forces to combat the virus. The number of new infections that the Robert Koch Institute reports to us every day mean that we are not overwhelming the response capacity of our public health systems, and through quarantine and containment measures, we've been able to also trace contact chains, and the app that we're working on will hopefully make this even easier. We've used recent weeks to strengthen our public health systems where we can. I'm most impressed with the efforts made by the municipality and the regional government, but also the Bundestag, that capacities for ICUs have been increased. And I see the amazing achievements that we've managed in the public health service, not least in the local health departments. And I'm very pleased that we were able to offer support for these departments, because that is exactly where the tracing of infection chains begins. And so much depends on this. International cooperation in the fight against the virus is incredibly important, with both in the EU but also in the G7 and G20 countries. Colleagues, we can be very pleased that we have all pulled together so well in recent weeks. But I see a duty here, the duty that what we have achieved so far not be endangered. Since March, we have lived with all kinds of types of deprivation. In some cases, even our rights we've sacrificed. And if we now risk a relapse, that would be so depressing. It would be such a shame if we end up locking down again. None of us want that to happen. So let us have both courage and prudence. Let us slowly, step by step, open our public life, but always be aware of the developments of the pandemic. And at work and in schools, cafes, and sports associations, let us return to these places, but let us retain hygiene rules, always washing our hands, keeping a distance, and being careful for others. I believe that if we remain consistent in our hygiene rules and therefore prevent a relapse, we will all benefit, because then both is possible in the next phase of the pandemic, both the protection of our public health, but also ensuring that our economy gets back off the ground as quickly as possible, preserving as many jobs as possible, and ensuring that we can enjoy our lives in the public sphere. Thank you. Thank you. The first question is from the AfD, Dino Kopala. Madam Chancellor, you have referred to the problems of the pandemic here, but you haven't said anything about the impact on the economy for this country. So my first question has to be about that. Your corona policy and that of the German government is currently destroying the livelihood of 2 million people in Germany. We have 10 million people in short-time work, and we're assuming that huge amounts of money will be disappearing in this. The unemployment has increased, the GDP has collapsed. Every week, this lockdown costs us 42 billion euros. It's the biggest recession since the Second World War. So where is your concept for financing what's going to happen after the crisis? And can you exclude today that ordinary citizens, by paying higher taxes, will have to shoulder these costs? Well, first of all, I'm very grateful that this pandemic occurred in a favorable, sound economic state of this country, which means that we were able to do a great deal to safeguard people's livelihoods. And I'm grateful that most of this Parliament has supported our efforts in this regard, and that people are in short-time work. Compensation is a consequence of the pandemic, but it shows that we are not leaving people entirely on their own, but that we can build bridges and reach out a helping hand to them, and that will remain our aim. And I believe that if we reach good agreements, obviously none of us can predict when we will have a medication to treat this illness, when we will have a vaccine, but we have got a good way of coping with it. I'm not saying that we will all not notice it. Of course we will, but we will do what we can to ensure that as many citizens as possible can go back to work, but in a responsible, careful manner. And then the question about whether the tax burden will be borne by citizens. I haven't heard a response for that. So are you planning to compensate for this somehow? Of course, you've destroyed livelihoods. What do you say for people in the hospitality industry? A restaurant owner who goes bankrupt. You have not helped them. But that's not the case at all. You know that there's liquidity help, there is short-time work compensation, and once they open their restaurants again, we're going to reduce VAT for the hospitality industry, and we'll be looking at how we can help in other ways as well. I haven't said that we've finished helping our industry. Of course, we will do more to stimulate it, and I can tell you that there are no plans to increase taxes on ordinary citizens. I mean, it's part of policy making, isn't it, that we can only give you a response based on where we are now. Otherwise, we would be soothsayers predicting the future, and I wouldn't suggest that I can do that. Now we have a colleague from the SPD. Madam Chancellor, Spiegel magazine has reported about the difficulties with seasonal workers. My own constituency is impacted on by this. We don't have enough data on this. Madam Chancellor, both in terms of the seasonal workers in agriculture, as well as workers in the meat industry, employees have been working in a deplorable state of affairs. We've heard a great deal about the fact that there hasn't been enough hygiene, which has led to a lot of people catching corona. What measures are in place by the government to tackle this? Do you agree with the SPD parliamentary group that we need to change the way we work here to both retain jobs but also ensure that people's health is protected and that they get fair wages? The German government, regarding the seasonal workers, has approved a concept which is coordinated with the Robert Koch Institute, which will mean that workers in agriculture will have to adhere to much stricter hygiene regimes. And we've also talked about the situation in the meat industry. We heard the shocking information from there, and we'll be debating that as well. The German government is planning to approve changes, and next Monday, the Labour Minister is going to present a concept on that, and I hope that we will be able to reach an agreement on this, particularly when it comes to the accommodation of workers in the meat industry. There are things that must be addressed, and we have to look at who is going to be made responsible for changing this. I have to tell you, I am also not happy with what's emerged here. When it comes to implementing these things for seasonal workers, it is, of course, the case that the authorities responsible on the ground have to scrutinize that these efforts are put into place, and the employers must also make sure that they adhere to these hygiene regulations. If not, there will be repercussions. Madam Chancellor, I would like to respond to the fact that the Labour and Social Minister Conference referred to this data, and 8 federal states countersigned this, saying that they want to ensure that the data that has not gone to the public health departments must be put forward to them, and we want to hear what can be done here, not least in terms of agriculture. Well, if the federal states are not able to give us the data, there's not much we can do. It's not the case that the German government has to generate this data. We are waiting for the federal states to give us that data, but as soon as we have it, we'll be happy to pass it on. And in terms of the number of seasonal workers, there's a strict quota of how many people are allowed to go where, and I think there the data is indeed clear. In the meat industry, this may not be the case, however. Manuel Höferlin from the FDP will be asking the next question. Thank you, President. Madam Chancellor, we have just heard how important the Corona tracing app may be in tracing infection chains, contact chains. Now, it is the case that researchers have been working on this for some time. I think it's over 7 weeks now that we've been working on this app. And this Corona tracing app, as far as I've understood it, is under the auspices of the Health Ministry. Now, you, as the German government, you've said there's a consortium of SAP and the systems working on this. I would like to know why it is the case that in the Chancellery's office, involving the Federal Press Office as well, the app is being developed. Is this because certain measures are being taken? Because now we've heard it's not going to be finished until June. Well, the Minister of the Chancellor's office visited you yesterday. I don't know if you didn't speak about the app at all, but if you didn't, I'm happy to talk about it with you. The Chancellor's office has a coordinating function in all projects of the German government. The Health Minister is responsible for the health aspect. Data protection is the Ministry of the Interior, and the Chancellor's office just coordinated it. Now, you know that we're pursuing a number of approaches. We have decided to go for the decentralized approach. France has gone for the centralized approach. We believe that the decentralized approach will give us better public acceptance, so that's why we've gone for that. Obviously, designing an app like this takes time. There's a great deal of trust that this requires as well, and I'm pleased that Telecom and SAP are involved in this project. We need an interface for the operating systems providers, because for most smartphones, and that's being provided in the days to come. And I know that they are working as hard as they can here, but it has to be done properly. Data protection must be addressed. The BSI and the Data Protection Commissioner is also involved in this. You said that the Chancellor's office is coordinating this. Might you perhaps be able to explain to me, however, why beyond the coordination role itself, things are being decided in the Chancellor's office? Or could you confirm that this is the case? For example, that the design of the app, the coloring of the name of the Corona warning app is being decided in the Chancellor's office and not by the designers, by Telecom or SAP? Is there any particular reason for this? And perhaps you can say one other thing too. If we have to wait so long for this app and it's being delayed, would you say that the Corona app will come before the vaccine or after the vaccine? I am confident that it will come before the vaccine, unless there's some vaccine miracle. No, it will be available before the vaccine is. But did SAP and Telecom complain that we're not responding to their design proposals, or what? The Federal Press Office is responsible. You know, there are agencies who put forward proposals. It's not the Chancellor's office that makes decisions like this. It's all of the portfolios responsible for it. And as far as I am aware, it was a peaceful process. So if somebody's complained to you, then let me know who that was. Maybe we left someone out. And then the CDU-CSU, Mark Hennigan, is going to speak. Madam Chancellor, in Coesfeld, my constituency, there's been a new rise of infections, and I'm massively upset that because of the Westfleisch meat industry, the discipline of the people in this area is ignored. I'm shocked and horrified that the hospitality industry in this area are suffering as a result of this meat industry's failings, and in the agricultural industry too as well. And now you have the expectation that we carry out a quarantine, and I think it's important that we talk again about the accommodation of workers in the meat industry. And so my question would be here on the 6th of May in the meeting with the state premiers. You said that in the case of clear regional rises of infections, that you would quarantine just locally, but that you could still ease some of the measures in other areas. I mean, do you have ideas about how you can just quarantine or ensure that companies like Westfleisch meat industries don't get to do this elsewhere? But the decision that we made together with the state premiers was something made in the state assemblies and with the local municipalities as well. And it is indeed the case that, you know, if you have hospitals or care homes or companies like this one, the factories like this one, but it's not just the factory, it's also the accommodation where the workers are housed. And that makes it spread a little bit more, the risk of infection, than if it were just in the company and nobody be allowed to leave this factory, say. So the decision was made to ensure that the easing of measures in North Rhine-Westphalia not take place here. And I'm pleased that we're acting so quickly and clearly, because I think we will be able to contain this outbreak of the infection there as a result. Another question? Harald Weinberg from Die Linke Left Party.
All right, Chancellor Angela Merkel there speaking to the Bundestag about her government's response to the coronavirus pandemic, from its lockdown measures to managing the economic fallout. And Merkel again reminded Parliament that we are still living with this virus, will be for some time, and she urged caution from Germans as the country reopens. And let's bring back our political correspondent, Kate Brady, now, who has been listening into this for us. Hi, Kate. We heard the Chancellor facing some critical questions there, particularly from the far-right AfD on the economic measures. What's your impression? I mean, how broadly do lawmakers support the steps that her government has taken?
Well, largely speaking, there has been a lot of support. Where the criticism comes in really is on this matter of restrictions, both when it comes to when those restrictions were imposed and how those restrictions are being eased as well. And one of the most contentious issues that we heard being addressed there just now as well is this idea of an emergency break. So the idea was that last week Angela Merkel agreed with the state premiers of Germany's 16 states that if a specific district reported more than 50 new cases per 100,000 inhabitants over the last 7 days, then the response, or an appropriate response, would be necessary from the state. And so what we've seen is some districts in Germany now postponing the relaxation of measures, and that has been largely due to these small outbreaks in slaughterhouses in Germany, in various parts. And so there are now being questions raised about how effective this emergency break can be, because in the meantime, of course, other businesses, as we heard there during the Chancellor's question time, other industries are now suffering as a result of these breakouts due to the meat industry and some of the accommodation. There's been questions raised about the accommodation, living standards and also working standards of workers there. And so that's now having a knock-on effect on other industries as well. But as you say, there was a question as well from the largest opposition party in the Bundestag, the far-right Alternative for Germany, about the economic repercussions as well, and how Germany plans at least to continue cushioning the economic impact. Of course, already we've seen a huge historical financial aid package signed off by the German government, some 750 billion euros that's already been signed off to keep businesses of all sizes and keep employees afloat. But of course, as restrictions remain in place, we are seeing hospitality reopen, and so that's been quite a relief for many businesses, but still under certain restrictions. And so a lot of businesses aren't being able to return to normal circumstances and are still going to be short on their usual income. So it was interesting that Angela Merkel pointed out, though, that while this virus is still with us, they can only at least plan, at least for now. That seems to be the strategy that the German government is taking, is planning for the moment and making policy according to the moment. Of course, things could look very different within 4 weeks, in the same way that 4 weeks ago things looked extremely different in Germany. And it seems, at least for now, things seem to be taking a more positive direction in terms of both the number of new cases and also that reproduction rate. But of course, those figures will continue to see experts and politicians analysing those over the next few weeks, because of course there is also a lag between when new cases are reported and when those tests are processed. So the effects of restrictions being eased right now, we might not even see that for another couple of weeks yet. So of course those are all factors that are going to be taken into consideration, both in terms of public health policy and economic policy here in Germany.
All right, our political correspondent, Kate Brady, reporting for us. Thank you, Kate.